So Eswar Prasad's with us, former head of the IMF's China division, now professor at Cornell University. This is the sleeping giant, in a sense, in the inflation battle with central banks, because this is an exogenous event that could make everything a great deal worse as central banks try to squeeze out inflation.
That's very true, Richard. I think the reality is that China still remains a very important manufacturing hub of the world, if not the major one. And it's crucial to many supply chains for a broad range of products that are important to Western economies, including the US. So anything that happens in China is going to have significant ripple effects, even if the amount of value added in some of these products in China might be quite limited. You still need China in order to finish the manufacturing part of many of these consumer goods, as well as certain types of industrial goods. So this is coming at a very bad time for the rest of the world, and the Chinese government certainly seems willing to take a hit in terms of its own growth in order to make sure that it can persist with this policy. It's having significant damaging effects on the Chinese economy, but for the rest of the world at a time when there are other causes where we're already seeing supply chain disruptions which have not fully recovered from the COVID pandemic, this is a really deadly blow.
Now, let's talk about that, because is it the sort of blow, I mean, you say it's a deadly blow, which sort of answers my question, but that will import sufficient inflation or export sufficient inflation through supply chain problems that central banks will have to move harder and faster to take account of this?
The difficulty with this is that even if this supply chain disruption is going to be somewhat temporary in the best case scenario, the risk is that with inflation rates where they are right now and continuing to persist, these could get entrenched in inflationary expectations, which in turn could affect wage demands, which then makes the problem even harder to deal with. Now, the difficulty that central banks face is that monetary policy, which is the tool that central banks work with, is not the right tool to deal with supply side disruptions. But if you don't deal with them, the reality is that inflation gets entrenched in economies and then it becomes even harder to root out. So it's a real conundrum for central banks fighting with monetary policy, a problem that monetary policy in the ideal circumstances should not be used to fight against.
Why is China doing this? Can they? I mean, I know their vaccine is not as effective as other countries, and there are worries about that. But don't they look and see what the rest of us have all done in the world, and that it's de facto the rest of the world is anywhere between 70 to 99% back to normal? Don't the Chinese leadership realize they are the absolute outliers here?
So they seem to take the view that victory against COVID is going to require a complete defeat, which essentially means eliminating COVID. And I think in the rest of the world, it's not proven to be a viable strategy. We're all learning to live with COVID and deal with it through appropriate vaccines and so on. But for the Chinese government, especially for President Xi Jinping, who's essentially on the cusp of becoming a leader for life beyond the traditional 2 terms, I think this has become really important to show that the Communist Party of China, under his control, can get its way even when it comes to a pandemic. It's having a pretty significant effect in terms of economic activity, and that seems to be a cost that the government is willing to pay in order to make sure that its edicts are maintained.
Right, so one assumes there's an element of control about all of this, proving to people, don't do this, we are in control, and if you chose to. But at some point, surely, and maybe it's after the party congress in the autumn, at some point they are going to have to relax it to allow some form of COVID into the country so that people get used to it. And I mean, you can't keep the country closed like this ad infinitum, getting rid of every case of COVID.
You're right, Richard. China cannot shut itself off from the rest of the world. It cannot afford to do so. That would not be good for China or for the world economy. So the question does become, at what point does China back off? But I think the government will have to find a face-saving way of doing this, somehow, claiming victory while at the same time acknowledging the reality that COVID cannot be eliminated entirely. And it's going to become increasingly difficult because the reality is that even though China might have more policy space than other countries, that policy space is becoming quickly constricted. The renminbi has already fallen in value by about 5% relative to the dollar over the last month or so. The stock market is not doing so well. So the ability to use monetary policy has become more constrained. And that too is a very difficult challenge that the government is going to face, and it's going to intensify over time. The longer you stick with the zero COVID strategy, the more constrained you will be in terms of policy, and the larger the economic costs. So far, the government has been willing to pay the cost, but I think the time will come when that will have to change.
And finally, on a sort of a higher level, if you will, the premise of our program tonight is that you have the two largest single economies in the world on very different economic policies, but each in their own way threatening to do damage through their policies to the rest of us.
That's true, and it is interesting that the policy circumstances in these two countries are making life more complicated for each other. What China is doing with its zero COVID strategy is enormously complicating monetary policy making in the US. And at the same time, the fact that the Fed is being forced into an aggressive path of interest rate increases is constraining China in terms of being able to undertake easier monetary policy that would prop up economic growth. So unfortunately, if these two countries remain in these policy circumstances and diverge even further, it's going to complicate matters for both of them and indeed the world at large.
And for the rest of us. Sir, I'm grateful for you tonight. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Thank you.